Well, hello everyone. Welcome to my review of Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker. Now, this is going to be a spoiler-filled review, so let's do this. I thought of doing this earlier, but all the hoopla and there was so much going on the internet, and I was still processing what this film is. I had to watch it a second time too, which I did today. So now that things are more calm and I can think straight, so I was like, okay, let's do this. So without further ado, let's start. Now, before I get into the story and the plot points of The Rise of Skywalker, let's kind of go back in time just a bit, back to when The Force Awakens released in 2015. Now, when that film released, it was a critical success. It still, I think, holds around a 93% on Rotten Tomatoes. And in the eyes of many, actually, it was a return to form for the series, because the original trilogy, obviously, in canon it takes place after the prequel trilogy, but it came out long before. And the prequel trilogy, even though I love Revenge of the Sith, it's one of my best Star Wars films. But in the eyes of many, people were like, oh, it's not the Star Wars that they like. So Force Awakens, what it did, it had a lot of recycled plot points that they used from The New Hope, but it also had these fresh elements to it, that it was a Star Wars for the new generation while kind of respecting what came before it. But when the film released, initially, obviously, people loved it, and it had a lot of repeat business. It's the highest domestic North American film at the box office. It earned, I think, around like 900 plus million at the North American box office. So it did good. Did really good. But as time went on, everybody was like, oh no, it is recycled. We need something different. This is basically the same thing we've seen before. So then comes in The Last Jedi. Oh yeah, 2017. Now, I'm not going to sit here and hate the film, because I actually liked the film. Now, there were a lot of risks taken in that film, and although I understand and I actually respect that film, that at some point you gotta change. Star Wars at this point has been going on for 40 plus years, and it's the Skywalker saga, including this Rise of Skywalker, minus the side stories, which were Rogue One, and if you want to count those, it's 11 films, but technically the canon, or if you just want to look at the Skywalker story, that those are 9 films. The Last Jedi, it had a lot of risk, and I think at a point it was too much. There were some risks taken that did not go well, even with me, but overall, actually, the film itself it felt like a risk. It completely did the opposite of what you expected it to do. In every point that it made, every plot point, every surprise, it exactly went the other way of what people expected it to do. So it didn't even give you the satisfaction of maybe, adhering to some of the things that maybe people would want. No, everything that you would expected, or you expected, the Snoke, Luke, Leia, Rey, Finn, all these characters, it went the other way. So then people were like, oh, this is not our Star Wars. Again, with that, it's not Star Wars. It's taking too many risks, and we want our Star Wars back. This is not going the place where we want it to, and da 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 and da da da. So then they decided, okay, let's bring back JJ, because after Rian Johnson directed the 2017 Star Wars: The Last Jedi, they actually had a different director, and I totally forgot to. Can't remember his name, and I totally forgot to get his name before I started this review. But anyways, they let him go, and they brought back JJ because of all the fan backlash. So here we are. Now, in a few words, this film is a sequel to two films. It's not a... So usually when there's a trilogy, you would see a certain story and a direct story that goes through those three films. So if this was, in this case, we had The Force Awakens, then we had The Last Jedi, and now we have The Rise of Skywalker. But what those first two films were in the trilogy were that The Force Awakens happened, and The Last Jedi did things so differently that it did not feel like a sequel. Obviously, it was a sequel, and there were some things that they took from The Force Awakens, but it retconned so many things that came before that it left not a lot of space to work with Snoke dying and Luke dying, and then unfortunately they probably didn't anticipated that, but between The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker, right after I believe The Last Jedi released, Carrie Fisher, who the late Carrie Fisher at this point, who played Leia, passed away. So that is now it's a tough thing to do, what to do with her character. So for this film to exist, and for this film to do a lot of things and be a sequel to those two movies and handle all the plot points that The Force Awakens set up, but then Last Jedi just retconned all of them, it's a really hard job. So this film has to be a movie on its own. Then it has to be a sequel to The Last Jedi and The Force Awakens. Then it also has to be the end of a trilogy. Then it also has to be the end of the Skywalker saga. Then it also has to be pleasing the fans of Star Wars. It has to try to do that to bring back those fans who didn't like the Last Jedi, and then it also has to respect the fans who like The Last Jedi. So some things they do gotta keep, and has to be a sequel to the Force Awakens. That's a lot. That is a lot for one film to handle. And first of all, I gotta commend J.J. Abrams that he actually took this upon himself. He could have easily been like, no, I don't want to do this one, get someone else. That's a really tough job, to just handle all those things all in one movie. So, here we are. So let's start with the story. The movie opens, and basically that classic text that goes by, it tells you the Emperor's back. It's not hiding anything, and if any of you have seen the trailers of this film, you know that they showed it. So it's not a something that was like hidden from everyone. They let you know. It was a couple months ago when that trailer came out, and that laugh and the dialogue came up at the end, and it was like, okay, so the Emperor's back. So right there we know he basically broadcasts this signal all over the galaxy and saying like, hey, he's back, because Palpatine works in style. So we all know, and now that's where the story starts. So the movie starts, we see Kylo Ren he's going ham and trying to find this object. So this object basically is a wayfinder to get to this planet Exegol, which is a Sith planet where after the events of Return of the Jedi, Palpatine has kind of been in hiding, and he's been, so here's another plot point, he's been there the whole time, and he's been controlling on the First Order. He's been kind of behind it all, or not really controlling, but orchestrating the whole thing. So the First Order finally comes to know in this movie, in Rise of Skywalker, that Palpatine wants to kind of combine his forces with them, and he wants to just finish the Resistance and the New Republic once and for all. That comes later, but so that's been it. So Snoke basically was a puppet, and that kind of answered the question, is like, oh, how did Snoke die just so easily? So he not just trains, he did train Snoke, but you do see when at in this planet, you do see these dummy Snokes that are not alive yet, and they are being made, or you want to say cloning. They've been made. They're kind of being put the life force into them, and he was the puppeteer. He was the one controlling the shots. And finally, that Snoke is gone. He's back, and he wants to put the final order. So the First Order was to kind of, that's why this group, or the new Sith regime, where they were being called the First Order, that it was just to basically get things started. And in this movie, it's all about the final order is about to happen, and that's when Palpatine is just gonna wipe everybody off, and the Sith is gonna rule again. So there's that. So that's basically retconning Last Jedi, and it's kind of going back to not really The Force Awakens, because if you really think about it, JJ really wanted Snoke to be the big bad, but because Last Jedi retconned it, you're like, okay, you're in a position. What do you do? So I understand the Emperor is coming back, and there's more to him, to his character, the reason he's back. They added one more element to his story, but you got to do something. So could they have gone with someone else, another Sith, or so? Maybe, yeah, but at the same time, Palpatine is Palpatine. He's known. We know him. We've seen the movies, and he's a threat. And the other thing I actually loved about it, that whole aspect of him hiding in for like 30 years or so, is that it shows the Sith doesn't really have to be in front of you. But using their powers and all, they are very manipulative, and they work in the shadows, and they try to control the nature of what's going on in the world, and without actually being in the front. And it was perfect Palpatine, so it worked with the story. So I actually liked it. I did not mind the Emperor coming back. It made sense to me, and they made sense out of Snoke's character. It all worked. And then you go into an adventure. So now the movie is turning into something we wanted since The Force Awakens, but The Last Jedi, what they did with the three main characters, so Rey, Finn, and Poe, is that they separated them. So Finn is doing this one thing on this one planet, Rey is somewhere else, Poe is somewhere else. So although The Force Awakens set them up to be like the new three leads, we never saw that chemistry. So this film, what it did, it's basically not set right after The Last Jedi. I think it's around like a year or so after. So right away you see this chemistry. So, and I've read a lot that where does this chemistry come from? Like, one, all of a sudden they know each other and they're bickering, and it's like all who and ha's, and they're fighting, and this childish back and forth. Where does this come from? The Last Jedi did not have it, but again, it made sense to me, because it's not like, as I said, the movie just takes place right after The Last Jedi. It's a bit in time. Some time has passed, so obviously they've spent some time together, and it makes sense. And also, what this first, or you can say like 45 to 50 minutes of the movie right after the opening, what this does is that it sends them on an adventure. Basically, they have to find this wayfinder. So there are two. So the first one, Kylo Ren finds at the start. That's how he finds Palpatine. And there's a second one. So they have to go on this journey to find this object. And some can say excuse. I did not mind it. It basically gives them a way to show this group working together. So Chewbacca, CP3O, Finn, Rey, Poe, all on this adventure, and that was great. That actually was. I was actually having fun, because you see this group of people that you really wanted to see together since The Force Awakens, and so you felt that's where it felt a callback to the original Star Wars films. It felt like an adventure, so it was definitely a callback to that, and which The Last Jedi, because it was so different, it ended up for a lot of people that, even for me, even though I liked the film, it didn't feel like that Star Wars film. This one, for the people who complain, it definitely did. Because you're on this adventure, and it's the spectacle, and they're going on these different planets, and there's like good chase scene in there, and it's all well done. Now, another thing that they kind of retcon right before they leave on this journey is Finn and Rose's relationship. So, in The Last Jedi, what they did, they introduced a new character, Rose. Basically, her older sister dies at the start of The Last Jedi, so she takes up on himself to kind of continue her sister's legacy. So she wants to be stronger. She wants to take matter into her own hands. Now, throughout the movie, they send Finn and Rose on this journey to find this object. But by the end of it, they also introduce a love relationship. Basically, Rose loves Finn. They kiss at the end, and Finn's kind of all confused. But by doing that, they also kind of forgot what they wanted to do with Finn from Force Awakens. So if you remember, in Force Awakens, he picks up the lightsaber. He tries to fight Kylo Ren at the end. So even though he didn't have any Force powers at that point, they were kind of setting his character up to become a Jedi eventually. So, because Last Jedi totally forgot that, and it almost like introduced something else, and then didn't let that character grow. And that was one of the negatives of that film, that Finn's character he was just kind of like an errand boy and didn't really follow the character that they set up in Force Awakens. Here, they finally started introducing that, and because they want to do that, they want to send him on adventure with the regular group that we wanted to see. What happened was that they actually retconned the hell out of Finn and Rose's relationship. I mean, really, there's no dialogue between them about it. There's a scene when they're about to go on this adventure. He basically asks Rose, "Hey, do you want to go?" And Rose replies that no, she has to stay behind and to do some stuff for Leia. And he just pats on the shoulder, and that's it. And you're like, wait, so I guess y'all broke up? But even I understand that. As I said, the movie takes place about a year or so after, so I understand that if they broke up, but at least say something if there was that. So that was one of the thing, I think, a negative and a positive at the same time, because it was the retcon something from The Last Jedi that people just didn't like, but they should have done it in a way at least respected it in some way, or some dialogue, something like, oh, take care, or, I hate that it didn't work out, but hey, be careful out there, something like that. But the other positive was that in this film, they finally actually introduced that Finn is actually getting a hold of the Force. He's not powerful, or he can't use it yet, but he has a sense of it. So by retconning one thing, even though I didn't feel like they did it in the right way, they introduced that positive, so that's where you feel like, okay, this is a sequel to Force Awakens, and it's a sequel to The Last Jedi at the same time. So while they're also on this adventure, Lando is back. And they basically also revealed that Lando and Luke were actually on a mission to try to find these wayfinders also. So that's also a surprise that Luke just didn't go in hiding just because of what happened with Kylo Ren and all. It was before he actually went into hiding, he actually went on, so he suspected something, so he went on this mission to find the Wayfinders, to find Exegol, the Sith planet where Palpatine is apparently was hiding. So he had a sense that Palpatine was back. So they don't really, Lando doesn't really say it, but it's by the end, they show in different scenes and you put it all together and okay, that's what happened. As far as Lando coming back, I understand. At the same time, it could have been anyone, but I think the reason they did it is because they killed Han Solo's character in The Force Awakens, and then they really couldn't do much with Leia's character because Carrie Fisher passing away. So they had to have someone familiar from the original trilogy. Luke died in Last Jedi. So, and then even though it could have been someone else, they made sure that there's a reason he's on that planet where they are to find the Wayfinder, is that the ship they followed while he was working with Luke, and that's the reason he's there. So you're like, okay, you either have to go with it. So if someone tells me like, oh, they didn't like the way they utilized him, it should have been more than just that, and basically he's in that one scene and then he appears towards the end. So there's that. You can either take it as a negative or a positive. Up to you. I'll leave that up to y'all. Next thing also that happens on that planet where they meet Lando is there's a scene involving Rey senses that Kylo is on that planet and he's after her. So in that moment where she's fighting, not really fighting, but they're basically, it's a force battle. So also in this, the Knights of Ren are after them, and they capture Chewbacca, and the ship they think that Chewbacca is on, she's trying to basically stop the ship from taking off, and Kylo is trying to let the ship go, and she uses the power, and she's trying to really use the power, and she actually electrocutes the ship, and it blasts off. So they think, okay, Chewbacca is dead and all, and then they leave the planet. Now that the way it's filmed, in the later in the film, you're like, just like basically a couple of scenes later, you're like, okay, the reason that they did that scene was like, okay, because they want them to go to this place, because then all of a sudden it's like, oh, Chewbacca's alive. So that really wasn't like a shock and didn't feel surprising, because the way I guess they did it, you knew the surprise, that you knew he was alive and it was coming. So I guess that's a negative, because the way they did it, it should have been better. It should have been the camera they used, the camera angles they used. You just knew. You're like, okay, yeah, he's gonna be back. He's not really dead. Um, and then they also introduced like General Hux as a spy. So he's the one. He's been leaking stuff to the Resistance. Now, the reason I think they did that was because he was someone. He was a controlling person in The Force Awakens. But in The Last Jedi, he literally became a joke. They did not utilize his character well at all. At all. So in this one, they just were like, okay, we're going to introduce him as the Resistance, because he just hates Kylo so much. He doesn't really care if the Resistance wins or not. He just wants Kylo to fail. And right after they reveal that, the next scene after, they figure out, oh, he's the spy, and he's dead. So that was kind of the slap in the face to The Last Jedi. But at the same time, it's understandable why they did that, because of how much they did not do justice to his character in The Last Jedi. His character was not redeemable. You can't go from like his character being so serious and just then being a joke, and then be like, oh, now he's serious again. You can. So they introduced as another character, which he's more controlling. He's supposed to be the general, the new general, and so I was like, okay, I get it. That came quick. They didn't really do anything with his character, so it was like, okay, I guess General Hux is dead. And yeah, then they're on this planet again. They have to find this wayfinder, and that's where this beautiful battle happens between Kylo and Rey, and it's gorgeous. They're on the remaining or skeleton like figure of the Death Star from the original trilogy, and the fight is happening and all, and it's that the fight itself is the camera work, the choreography, everything was beautiful. It was not as, I would say, hard hitting as the lightsaber battle in The Last Jedi, or even in the final battle at the end of The Force Awakens. But I think the meaning behind it was more of like the scope of things. They tried to show what's at stake, so the camera was more wide angle, and they're trying to show this fight in these little characters versus the whole body of the Death Star in the back. And right before this scene, I forgot. So they introduced this new twist that Rey is actually the granddaughter of Palpatine. And I was like, wow. And I was like, hey, at the same time. But then I thought about it. And of course, these films were not written. They didn't plan this trilogy. But it kind of made sense. And after that battle with Kylo, she basically wants to go in hiding. Right after that, she wants to go in hiding. And in that battle, actually, before I go further, in that battle, something happens. So they're fighting and Kylo is actually overpowering Rey, and she actually is giving up. She does not have any more moves or to try. He's obviously more skilled. General Leia, or Princess Leia, but she's General at this point. So she's still back at the base. She uses all the life force she has left to stop Kylo from attacking. Rey doesn't realize this at that moment, so Kylo just is like all frozen, and Rey takes his lightsaber and just blasts him. And you're like, oh, so Kylo's dead. And Leia's obviously, because she just uses everything in her power, and she's gone. Yeah, so General Leia, she dies. Now, Kylo is just sitting there, and Rey realizes that what she's done, and this anger and that's where you tell like she's really conflicted, and she wants to be good, but that anger, the dark side is coming out, and she realizes that Princess Leia, actually General Leia, she died, and the reason she died is she gave everything to stop Kylo from moving forward. Because I think at that point, if Kylo really struck Rey down, he would have been gone. He would have gone forever. He would have turned to the dark side, and that's that. So her stopping him was like a moment of truth for him, is that his mother gave up her life for him. And this is where they introduce a new force power, is Rey can actually heal. So you can actually heal someone through the force. Now I'm gonna go another spoiler here. If you have not watched The Mandalorian, cover your ears. But if you don't care, obviously listen through. So in the episode 7, the baby Yoda actually uses that power. So obviously, if you want to look at from a perspective of who did it first, technically the Rise of Skywalker did it first, because the film was made long before The Mandalorian. They made The Mandalorian, the TV series. But now by the show showing that the Force can be used in this way, and then Rey using it, obviously they're setting up for the next movie that's probably going to be coming out in a few years. So they're setting up for the new Jedis to use these powers, and so I was like, okay, there's no set rule somewhere that says, the Force can't be used this way, or the Force can't be used. So they have to introduce new powers at some point. So I like that. I like seeing that they're introducing more to the Force. So anyways, she heals, and she's just totally kind of broken down, and she takes Kylo's ship and leaves. And they show Kylo just standing there, conflicted. Just, you can tell he just doesn't know what to do anymore. And by the way, I gotta tell, the acting was superb in this movie. I loved everyone, but Adam Driver as Kylo and Ben, he killed it. He, I think, is the best in this trilogy. If there's one character you want to remember, I think it's his. That conflict that he fought throughout this trilogy. I think that's the one consistent thing that they actually did throughout this trilogy of films, is his character, and he played that beautifully. And it's in this moment that I'm about to describe, it all comes down. So while he's just standing there and debating, there's no dialogue, there's just the music, and he's just there, Han Solo appears. Yeah, so they actually brought back Harrison Ford just for this scene. And it's a callback to The Force Awakens, so where Kylo, if you remember, Kylo is talking to Han, and he's like, I don't know what to do, and can you help me? And he's like, yes, and he just turns on this lightsaber and goes through Han. It's the same moment, same exact dialogue, the way Han touches Kylo, and he brings up his lightsaber, but instead of actually, obviously he knows it's his imagination, but actually still going through with like turning it on, he just throws it. And he looks back and Han's gone. So, in that talk, he finally calls him Ben. It's like, he's like, I'm done, or something along those lines. Kylo says to Han, he's like, no, Kylo is done. Ben is still alive. And that's the moment where, like, okay, Ben Solo, he's back. He's finally back to the... He's left the dark side and is back to the light. So, now Rey is on the planet where Luke was hiding. I believe... what was it called? I don't remember. There's just too much information. Anyway, so she basically goes on that planet, burns the ship that she stole from Kylo after their fight, and basically she's burning it down because she just doesn't want to deal with this anymore. She's I think because of what just happened, and they're showing that the character, she's just as given up and she just wants to go in hiding, and that's that. And she's throwing all these books and all in the fire and all, and she throws her lightsaber, and a hand comes out of, and he just grabs the lightsaber, and it comes out the Force Ghost of Luke, and he's like, damn lady, what are you doing? And there he tells her that, one, Leia always knew that she was a Palpatine, and even they kind of show that Luke kind of always knew too, and Leia sensed that, but they just never told her because they saw the good in her, but there was no reason of telling her. And also, this scene, I think, will make the fans happy, because if you remember the Return of the Jedi, it was between the conversation between Luke and Leia, when at the end they kind of have this dialogue where, like, okay, she's eventually is going to become a Jedi too. But in The Force Awakens and in The Last Jedi, we at one point we do see her power, the I call it the Mary Poppins moment of The Last Jedi, where she gets blasted in space and then she's like just gets back to the ship using her power. It was very cheesy, very cringeworthy, but that's the only time we saw her using her power. So this, through de-aging and through CGI trickery, they actually show young Luke and Leia actually training together, and that was amazing. So the reason they probably would have opted not to, even if they really opted not to show that scene, it wouldn't have mattered. They could have just showed the scene as Luke just telling Rey the story, but I guess they wanted to make the fans happy and at least show at least one time in the whole saga Leia using a lightsaber. So through CGI trickery, through de-aging, they show that, oh, they're training with a lightsaber, and it was actually a very, very cool moment. The first time it happens, you're like, whoa, like you really want to go back and you want to have this movie. Obviously it can never happen, but just them probably just training together, that was really cool. So basically Luke tells Rey that in that training, when they were training together, Leia sensed that at some point her son, what's going to happen with her son. So she actually stops her training and gives up on the her lightsaber, and her lightsaber, actually Luke had it all this time through The Last Jedi, and wishing that one day someone else will actually uses lightsaber for good. So Luke basically put some sense into Rey that, fear is kind of, or facing the fear is the job of the Jedi, and that's something we've learned throughout the last few movies, and you have to face it. You can't run from it. Face it and fight it and go over it. Learn from it and try to beat it and succeed. So he basically gives Rey both the lightsaber and is like, okay, you can go. And Rey's like, well, I don't have a ship anymore. And then they show Luke's ship from the original trilogy, and that's basically, they show that's how he reached that planet where he was hiding. So, and then she's like, okay, well, I don't have a wayfinder. And then she remembers, oh, there were always two. So she takes the one out of Ben's ship, Ben Solo, and she basically uses that to go to Exegol. And while she's doing that, she's obviously relaying the message back to the Resistance of, hey, this is the path to Exegol. So that's that. They gather up, and Rey's on her way, and the Resistance, they're gathering up this force, all what they can. They're obviously, they know they're not enough. So we see Lando with the Millennium Falcon. He goes one way, the Resistance. Basically, the idea is he'll go out and he'll call as many people he can for help, because obviously they know they don't have a big of a fleet to actually combat this. And when they get to the planet, you see these easily like 50s or hundreds of ships, these big ass ships with the Star Killer technology from The Force Awakens, that it can, like, each ship can now actually destroy. They don't even need any more Death Stars or so. These ships, one can actually destroy a planet now. So it's like, oh, so they obviously, all this time they've been waiting since the start of the film, because they need this signal to get out of there, and they're preparing and all. So instead of, before the time hits that they're actually out of Exegol, because they have to go through this space, the Resistance got to make sure that they actually combat these spaceships in their zone without them ever entering or ever leaving that space. And that's where, we have the conversation finally with the Rey confronting Palpatine, and Palpatine basically tells her, like, all this time he actually never wanted her to die, as the story was kind of telling you all this time. He actually wanted her to, the reason, so I forgot, I'll tell you now, is the reason Rey was left on that planet was actually her parents left her there because they felt that nobody will be able to find her there. Now Palpatine, they thought, or everybody thought, that the Palpatine wanted her because he wanted to kill her, but he actually just wanted her so that he can, because he's so weak, she can actually kill him, so he can transfer all his soul into her, and she can be like the Empress, and the Sith will rise under her, and she will be the one controlling the galaxy. So they have this talk, and she basically tells him nope, she's not gonna follow through. And you see this Sith troopers, or Sith Knights, I think they're called, kind of coming around her, and they're getting ready to fight. And all this time the ships arrive, and they're on the battle of their own, and obviously there's so many ships, and this scene, the battle, it was a spectacle. The whole airspace battle, they always get to me. I always love them. It's especially the one in The Force Awakens when the Resistance finds Han Solo and Finn. I love it. I think it's the highlights of any of the Star Wars films whenever they show a space battle. So this was done beautifully. So while the battle is going up top, Kylo also arrives on this planet, and he does not have a lightsaber. So the Knights of Ren also follow him to this planet. Oh, by the way, the Knights of Ren, all this hype, wasted. And it's not that they don't talk throughout the film, it's just that, and I understand they can only do much. There's so many characters they have to juggle through, but they just never felt threatening. It's nothing, they never did anything that special that you feel that's threatening. But anyways, there's this fight that happens between, while Rey is fighting the Sith Knights and Kylo is fighting oh my god, this is how much this movie is. The Knights of Ren. My brain, there's so much story. Jeez. Obviously, the Knights of Ren are overpowering. He's trying to do as much force pushes and all, but they're still overpowering. There's 6 of them. He's only 1. So what Rey does... So while this moment is happening at the same time, so Rey is about to Palpatine just closes his eyes, okay, strike me, and Rey is about to strike him. So what she's actually doing, and this is the new force power, they can actually go through space and time and relay each other stuff, give each other stuff. Yeah. So she kind of brings this lightsaber behind her, and Kylo actually grabs it, and he does this Han Solo moment like that, shrugs, and he's like, yep, I got a lightsaber now, and he just blasts the shit out of all the Knights of Ren. They gone. He catches up to her, and they're like, okay, let's finish it together. But obviously Palpatine is Palpatine. He's really powerful in the Force. He kind of takes a bit of force out of him, and he doesn't know that he can do that, and he senses that while he did that, it's actually bringing his old body back, and he's actually regaining the health and the powers that he had back in the prequel trilogy when he was really powerful. And so he just blasts them again, and he just grabs all the power he can, and they both just faint right there. And with that power, he electrocutes the sky. Damn, that scene, he blasts it. He's that powerful. So all of a sudden we see his original orange eyes, and the model and the makeup that they used at the end of Revenge of the Sith. That it's him right there. So all these resistance fighters are obviously, it's like an EMP, right, to all the tech that's out there. So they can do anything. All these ships are falling, and everything's going. And while he actually took this power, what he actually did before he electrocuted the sky, he takes Ben and he force pushes it. It's just like your grandfather pushed me down, I'm gonna push you down something. So he just force pushes it, and Ben goes rambling out, and he just falls down this long pit. And then he's electrocuting all this sky, and Rey finally comes back to it, and she's trying to get up, and you see the voices, or you hear the voices of every single Jedi that they've shown in the shows that I've actually not watched. So you hear Yoda, Luke and Mendo, and then even Anakin, not Darth Vader. Anakin. I guess they probably brought back the actors, all these actors to kind of lend their voice for that scene, and you hear all these voices, and it's like you can do it. Thousand generations of Jedi are in you. You can do it. And Rey gets up, grabs one saber, and she's basically reflecting back the electric, like all that electric. I call it electric, man. I don't know what it's called in force terms, or force electric, I guess. Mm-hmm. And then she can't do it with one, and then she's doing it with two. Obviously, some of it is because obviously it's Palpatine. He's really powerful. It's reflecting onto her too, but then she just pushes, and that's it. Palpatine gone forever. She not just pushes him down on something this time, he's gone. His skin just vanishes, and his skeleton, everything just wipes him off. And because she used all his strength to do that, and obviously she was getting hit at the same time, she dead, or almost dead. She falls down and all. That's that. And at the top, you see the Resistance are finally winning, because Lando, a call back to the New Hope, a New Hope moment, where it's like Luke with his ships, he's trying to get into the Death Stars. They're trying to destroy the Death Star, and they're like, Han Solo left them, and he surprises and he's like, hey, I'm back, and hey, Luke, you can do it. That moment we had in this, where Lando comes back, comes helping them with all these ships from the galaxy. Everybody's there. And and you finally see the Resistance winning, and that's that. And then basically Rey's body is just sitting, laying there, and you see Ben come up. He climbs back up, and he's hurt from the Knights of Ren fight. He actually got hurt, and then obviously he got hurt from Palpatine throwing him down. So what he does, he actually heals Rey, and you can tell he's using everything he has in him to do it. Rey gets back up, and we get a really, if you want to call it a cringy moment, for I think it was a bit cringy. They kiss. No dialogue, no nothing. They just kiss. And then Ben falls back. He dies. And you see his body fade what's his name, man? I keep forgetting names in this review. And we saw that. So some of the things we've been seeing in Star Wars movies lately is that somebody dies, they really don't show the body fade. So this was more a callback to the original trilogy, where they was like, okay, if their Jedi dies, the body just doesn't just sit there, it actually fades away. So he just fades away, and that's that. And then we see the ending, and the whole galaxy is happy that the Sith has finally been done, and Rey basically visits Luke towards the end. They're all happy, they're all celebrating, and they show that Rey is visiting Luke's home, the foster home that he was at, and she buries Luke's lightsaber and Leia's lightsaber at that place. I guess their memories, they're gone, so she just wants to let that all go. And they also show that she actually has made a new lightsaber for herself, which is the color of orange. And it's a callback to A New Hope moment again, where they show the sun rising and she's just standing there, and that's when the saga ends. So, and I can't even think of if maybe I missed some points, but there's that much story. And this movie, as I mentioned, in the non-spoiler video that I did a few days ago over the weekend that this movie had a lot in it. And now we're going to go towards the rating itself. Now, as I said, this movie had a lot to do. You can't really blame JJ. Some of the things obviously are just retcon just like that. And you understand it, and you also wish there was something more. I definitely wanted at least 30 minutes more in this movie, just to give some characters some time to talk, just so them some downtime, just to add a bit more to the story and give these character moments some more character moments. I think it would have helped the film. And I think the hate that's going towards the film, that this one of the negatives is like this movie moves at a pace that it's too much, and it is a lot of things that they need to handle, and a lot of things need to juggle, from The Last Jedi, from The Force Awakens, and Palpatine is back, so they need to handle that story, and all of these elements. There are too many things. And I actually, while saying this, I also forgot they introduced a character for this character I felt was really underutilized. It's played by Kerry Russell, and basically it's an old flame of Poe's, and they introduced that too. And there's another character they introduced in the movie, which while they're on the planet where the Death Star remains are, it's basically a group of people who are basically like Finn. They were snatched when they were really young, and they grew up with the First Order, but they didn't want to do it anymore, so they ran away. So they introduced that. So there's so many things, new characters that they're introducing, and there's so many elements to the story itself that it has to answer. And it has to answer from The Last Jedi and The Force Awakens, and it has to bring the saga to a close. The film sometimes, some of the things are negatives. It is not a perfect film. Okay, let's get to the rating. So with all of this, it's not a 9 out of 10. It's not an 8 out of 10. I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10. Look, JD did the best he could. And all this hate that's going towards the film is actually really sad. The film is not that bad. Yes, they could have planned it better. Yes, for sure. But based on what we got, and based on the complaints of the fans from the first, and then they made Last Jedi, and then we complained again that we didn't like The Last Jedi because it didn't feel like Star Wars, I think this is the best they could have done. They're trying to make it, not just the fans, I think they're trying to please everyone. So as a casual viewer, if you're not into, if you're into Star Wars but not so into where you want to just hate or love any single thing, you will enjoy the movie. It's definitely a spectacle. It's definitely a good time at the movies, and you should definitely support it. Don't get into that online hate of this movie is bad and it's destroyed the Star Wars and Disney's destroyed this and that. I don't think so. One thing they can definitely do for next time is that have one showrunner for the Star Wars film, just like Kevin Feige is doing for the Marvel films, and so that this way they have one set story and a path that they need to follow, so that no director just comes in and just tries to do his own thing or her thing, and then you're in a situation like this. So yeah, the Skywalker saga comes to an end, and that's it. I think the next one is slated for 2022. But you know what? Even though this film was not the perfect film, it was still good. And I'm still a Star Wars fan. I'll be there first day, first showing when the next one comes out. I did not hate it. I think it was good. It did the best it could. So with that, guys, hopefully you liked it. This is the first time I did this long of a spoiler review especially for this film. I think it was needed. So hopefully you watch the video all in its entirety. Hopefully you liked it. If something you didn't like and all, please comment, please like the video, please dislike the video, let me know whichever. Subscribe. Appreciate the support that I've been getting until now, so thank you for that. So with that, y'all, thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all later. Ta-ta.